And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Rocket Arena, Cleveland, Ohio. Michigan State Spartans, number 2 seed, Paul, in the South region, taking on Bryant University Friday night. Today we're here at Rocket Arena for press conferences. We watched the live public practice. That was a lot of fun. We got Konyndyk here. We're going to talk about it. Paul, what'd you think?
I just got to say, it's always great to be here. You know, I was talking to our friend Sean Windsor earlier today, and it's just a privilege to cover this event. It's the one thing that, I think we take a lot for granted in our profession. This is the one thing that a lot of us look forward to every year because it's so unique, and it's really kind of cool to be here. So it never gets old. And this is, it's great being in like a Midwest town like Cleveland, and it's going to be great for Michigan State fans and other. It's going to be a good day for us watching basketball when we're not working tomorrow. Being a late game, it sucks for us as reporters, but it's cool to see some teams and watch some games, and I'm looking forward to it.
It sucks deadline-wise. It doesn't suck to be here.
No, it doesn't, not at all. No, but I mean, it's a great deal, and I like the way that I like the pod system, so you can get out and you can see a lot of different games, and it's kind of fun.
No golf tomorrow.
No, I can't wait to see St. Mary's.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say it never gets old. I was down the sideline here when Michigan State was practicing, and I was shooting some video. It's up on the YouTube channel. By the way, give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. We'd love for you to do that. And I was shooting some video, and, Izzo's making the rounds. He's talking to Spinarkle. He's talking to this guy. He's coaching his team and everything. It kind of came in my direction a little bit and gave me a fist bump. I gave him a fist bump. And I said, it never gets old. And he turns around and goes, nope, it never gets old. And Izzo was getting one of those tears in his eyes like he does. He was emotional today. He never takes these things for granted either.
Yeah, and the players, obviously they haven't made a deep run. They've gone to the Sweet 16, but, like older guys. But there's like a nervous, like a good anxiety, just wanting to be here. Like talking to Jeremy Fears in the locker room, they're watching the McNeese State Clemson game kind of in the background, and these guys, they want to be out there playing. They want to be competing. They can't wait to be part of this event, and it was kind of like it's a good anxiety. It's like, just how special it is, and they're not taking it for granted, and they're grateful to be here, but they want to do something. They want to do something incredible.
All right, I want to remind everybody to take those bottles and cans back. Shoe Pan. Take them back. That's the campaign. We've been talking about it all year. As you all know, Michiganders forfeiting $105 million last year in bottles and cans that weren't returned. So don't let you be in that category. Return them. It's good for the environment. It's good for our lakes and our beaches and industry and the environment and everything. So take them back. A message from Shoe Pan Recycling, a supporter of Michigan State sports and a supporter of recycling. Shoe Pan, take them back. Now, as far as Michigan State goes, you mentioned there's a positive anxiety, kind of the can't wait to get out there. It's kind of a long layoff for March to go from Saturday to Friday. They can't wait. They are fresh. They want to get out here and show something. What version of Michigan State do you think we will see? Do you think we'll see one that's overamped and hitting the back of the iron and trying to do too much too fast and get into turnover problems? Or do you think it's going to be a sharpened version of Michigan State?
I think the fact, like Tom always talks about the elephant in the room.
The white elephant.
Yeah, I know.
He's mixing metaphors on that one, but we
he's
get
done it for years, and we enjoy it. It makes me chuckle every time he hears it. As someone that had white elephant gift Christmas parties for our family, we had some great gifts growing up. But that's one of the white elephants in the room for Tom Izzo is the timing of this thing, and it's something. It's a real thing. Jeremy Pierce, how excitable he is, but he wanted to be playing that thing today. So when they're sitting around, waiting around, you got to be able to do. You can't. You got to use your time wisely. So players are going to have to be like getting in some extra film study. Listen to music, whatever. However you stay cool. But for guys like Jeremy Fears who are excitable, guys like Jackson Kohler, who runs hot, you've got to be able to kind of sit back and wait for your turn. And I think this is unique because you don't have a lot of these events like this where you're sitting around. There's not many. They don't even have high school equivalents of this where you're kind of waiting around, sitting around. Maybe the state tournament, where you've got 4 games in a day or whatnot, but it is a new type of thing, and Michigan State really wants to play. So yeah, you could get one of those deals where the car backfires, and we've seen that in the past. But I think the teams that have success in this, it's like it comes down to fundamentals. It's like, okay, you don't try to do too much, but you try to do what you do well. And do it at a high level. And for Michigan State, rebounding, not forcing things in transition, but taking advantage of transition opportunities, playing good position defense, and not playing over the top, like spazzing out and committing fouls left and right. But I think going back to your to their principles. This is a different type of environment. We just talked about that, but having played in a lot of high pressure games down the stretch against really top level opponents, where it was like really short prep, we got to get this done and play at a high level. Michigan State was able to do that. I think we'll see a good version of Michigan State, personally. Especially if this Bryant team lets them run. If they, that's one of the things I asked a couple players is, do you think, they say they want to run, but are they going to run? Because we've seen a lot of teams break tendency against Michigan State and throw them a curveball, and that's kind of the unknown. So there are some unknowns with this. The late night of the game, that's an unknown. Mm-hmm. Some of the different size lineups that Bryant throws out there, that's an unknown. But there's a lot of different things that are kind of unknowns, and I guess that's one of the things that makes this tournament fun.
Yeah. Bryant's head coach, Phil Martelli Jr., was talking about that a little bit, and he said, we have to be who we are. He's kind of asked about tempo and those type of things. When they played St. John's earlier in the year, they said they want to run, but in not exactly his words, but in doses, maybe not all the time. And they played zone against St. John's and against Grand Canyon. Didn't turn out well in the long run. But they did try to slow the pace a little bit with those teams in terms of defensively, make them work a little bit. He said, hey, we have to be who we are. If we tried to adjust, this is what he said today, if we tried to adjust who we are, the results would be even worse. So who they are is a team that'll rebound and run. That's who Michigan State wants to be, a team that'll rebound and run. So based on what he said today, I wouldn't be surprised. He seemed very earnest and believable that they're going to try to be who they are, and they're going to try to get out and run. And like John Beilein said earlier this week, teams that have tried to do that against Michigan State in the past, it's usually not a good idea. They usually go down hard, as Beilein said.
I'm thinking about the Memphis team that was pretty athletic, and they had a lot of really good athletes that Michigan State played. And was it Detroit that they played at Memphis? And that team was like, the talk ahead of that team, ahead of that game was that we're more athletic than Michigan State. We have better athletes, and that was at a time when Brandon Dawson was the best athlete on the roster, and Gary Harris is a dang good athlete as well. And Michigan State really really dominated that game in a lot of ways, because Memphis tried to run. Michigan State just did it better. So I don't know if, what Bryant is going to do. Like, I don't think, watching some of the Bryant stuff from that St. John's game, St. John's is a completely different team,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if Bryant is capable of, doing that with Michigan State. But one of the things that I think Michigan State can do to help themselves against a Bryant team that wants to run is, and a lot of guys in the locker room were talking about this, is because of Bryant's size, because of having the big wings and whatnot, guards have to rebound at a high level. So it's not just Jackson Kohler, it's not just Carson Cooper or Cohen Carr, it's everybody helping out. And, if Michigan State can get good action in there with guards like Jeremy Fears going hard, Jaden Akins, Trey Holloman, Jace Richardson, all those guards, whomever's in there, if they can help out on the glass and do their part, then I think you're going to see some real production and transition. The thing that Michigan State always gets into trouble against some teams is when they don't out-rebound them by a lot. You look at the Wisconsin game the last time out. The first time Michigan State played Wisconsin, there was a double-digit rebounding advantage. In this one, it was like 4 or 5. And we've seen that in other games as well, where even against teams like an Iowa team, where I think Michigan State ended up with a 9 rebound advantage, but they were down at halftime in the rebounding margin. So if Michigan State wants to be that team that runs, if Michigan State wants to be that team that can, that can take out Bryant with the running game, they've got to rebound at a high level, and that's one of the big keys to this game. And I think the fact that Bryant is such a good offensive rebounding team, averaging 13 or so a game, that has Michigan State's attention, and that's a really good thing in my opinion, that Michigan State knows. Michigan State's really good usually when everybody is talking about, okay, this team does this really well, and we've got to counter it. I think back to the Illinois game.
Exactly.
When Illinois was leading the country in rebounding at that point, Michigan State matched them. And in the second meeting with Illinois, they surpassed them by a significant margin. There's been other games this year where Michigan State has gone up against a really good rebounding team, or a team that's measurable to Michigan State in the rebounding margins, and Michigan State has dominated that team on the glass. So I think being fresh, being focused, and also knowing that this team likes to get out and rebound and run, I think Michigan State's going to take that personal. And I think that can help them by taking that personal, because that's the first key to beating Bryant, in my opinion, is to lump up that rebound margin and have a healthy advantage on them.
You took the words out of my mouth on all those things. I was going to say those same things about rebounding. It's interesting because sometimes they will send four to the boards. They want to be who they are. If they continue to do that a little bit against Michigan State, that's going to be a really interesting derby every time there's a rebound available. And Michigan State's going to be emphasizing the defensive boards like they always do. And if Bryant is kind of, I don't want to say haphazard with their shot selection, they're just very loose with it. They don't play with much of a conscience. They will let it fly. If that's the case and they're not hot and Michigan State's controlling the boards, it's going to be 100 miles an hour the other way. One of Bryant's weaknesses, in my opinion, is transition defense. So how that matches up with Michigan State, if they're not shooting well and Michigan State is clearing the glass, it could get away quickly for Bryant. I still think Bryant's got about a 10% chance to win, and that's a lot for a 2 seed. I think they're as good as Middle Tennessee State was that one year. Different type of team, but I think they're just as good. I think this Bryant team, if you put them on the court right now with Minnesota, I think they'd probably beat Minnesota. If Michigan State were playing Minnesota, you would think, yeah, they'll beat Minnesota. But you don't know for sure because it's a Big Ten game. I think it's that type of thing. You have to hope if you're Michigan State that they're not hot and they don't get all kinds of juice going. It's good for Michigan State that it's in the Midwest. It's in Ohio. There's going to be a lot of State fans here. That'll help. If they are a little bit flat or can't get it going, that's going to help. But overall, I think Bryant's a good, solid number 15 seed. Can they do what another team from the America East did a few years ago when Maryland, Baltimore County, as a 16 seed, upset Virginia? That Maryland, Baltimore County team was like 14 of 28 from three, and they were a really good three-point shooting team all year, like 37, 38%. Bryant's a pretty good three-point shooting team, not as good as that Maryland, Baltimore County team was, but that's the type of history that Bryant's going to be chasing in this game. And I think one other thing that Bryant's could have trouble with, Michigan State's backcourt defensive pressure. When you have Akins and Holloman and Fears that really get into your kitchen in the backcourt, that's something that they don't see in the American East a lot. That's something that Grand Canyon did to them and gave them trouble, is the defensive pressure. If you can upset the apple cart out there in the perimeter, that's another thing for Michigan State that could tilt this thing to the Spartans in a decisive way.
Yeah, so I think if you want that defensive pressure from Michigan State's guards to be brought to bear on this, you've got to be careful about defending and getting up in those guys without fouling. Like the Penzan kid is really skilled, and you can put the ball on the floor, and it's going to take a minute to adjust to him. I know, he's just crafty, and those guys are hard to defend, and guys that are like him, like he's I want to say a better version of Frankie Fiddler, and guys like that know how to put the ball on the floor, and they know how to use their bodies, and they know how to get fouled. And, so Michigan State can't have one of these deals where Jeremy Fears gets 2 fouls early, or a Jaden Akins or a Jace Richardson, Trey Holloman. You want those guys to be at their defensive best. And to do that, I think it's going to take. It's not just the guards; it's going to be a communication with everybody. But they've got to do it smartly. And the other guy, the big guy that
Mitchell or Timberlake.
Timberlake, that's another guy that you got to be careful about who you're defending. That, I don't see many guys that spin dribble. You know what I'm saying? Like in the cutups that you put together. And I watched this morning while I was waiting for you to get ready. I'm like, dang, not many guys like spin dribble as much as him, and that's something new. And
he does it tight and strong and quick too.
Right. And the thing is, he talked to Michigan State players, and they face some tricky dudes like T.J. Bamba from Oregon that are kind of have some of his game. Like John Tonje a little bit. Obviously Timberlake doesn't shoot as well, but they haven't faced anyone quite like him, and they got to be careful about that too, because that is the kind of guy, when you get the tweener types that have like a rare skill set, those are the kind of guys that do damage in the NCAA tournament. And you can think of, go ahead and think in your head of all the guys over the years that have had either weird body types or like that, or like non-traditional, but kind of funky skill sets that really kind of do a lot of damage. And there's 2 or 3 of those guys every year. And that's kind of one of the things that scares you in the NCAA tournament, a guy like that going off.
He's strong and he's a good passer. He's got good court vision. He's a team-oriented guy. He's a distributor, leads the team in assists as a strong muscle point forward. He's like a 6'5", less athletic Brandon Dawson, because Dawson couldn't really shoot from the perimeter, and Timberlake doesn't shoot real well from the perimeter. But he's a rebounder. He's a shot blocker. He's an athlete, finishes with the spin dribble, gets above the rim, plays above the rim, and good rebounder. He's the only player in the country that's averaging like 15-plus points, 8-plus rebounds, 4-plus assists, and 1.5-plus blocks. So he's doing it all. good player, and at six, they list him at 6'6". He's a bigger guard, 6'5". So that's what I was talking about in the film cut-ups. Who do you put on him? Akins, I'd imagine.
Well, Akins has gone up against like a guy like Bamba, who's 6'4", 225. You going up against Tanjay. I think you start out with. I think you hit him with multiple guys, but Akins is the guy that you start with, and then the dude's gonna be on the floor for a lot, and then you can throw in a Cohen Carr. I think Cohen Carr, against that as a off the bench guy, a Cohen Carr, we've seen him improve tremendously on defense over the course of the year. He's had a couple games where he's struggled defensively, and he's still growing. But if Akins can start out strong on him and make him work, and then you get Cohen Carr coming off the bench, and then after Cohen Carr presumably softens him up a little bit, then maybe Frankie Fiddler. But it's going to take a group effort, and it's going to be like one of those things like Akins, Carr, and then Fiddler.
I think Akins, Carr. But, the other thing about Carr, Michigan State might have to go small in this game a lot.
Yeah.
And they'll try to go two bigs because when they send Mitchell to the bench, and Mitchell's their starting center, he's listed at 6'11". He might be 6'9". I'm not sure. He's pretty good. Had a good game he had 20 and 10 against St. John's. He plays about 20 minutes a game. So there's 20 other minutes a game when they're kind of, although they've got big guards, but then they go positionless. Everybody's like 6'4" to 6'7". So, people that have watched the video cut-up that I put together, who does Kohler guard in that whole group? Carr is great because he can, in a positionless type of game like that, he can play positionless ball and play defense on a lot of those guys. But you have to pick and choose who you want him on, because Barry is a guy who's, he's listed at 6'8". He might be about 6'6" or so. In my article on Monday, I compared him to he's like a 6'6" Ray Weathers type. He can shoot threes. He's athletic. He's strong. Good in the open court. He kind of plays the 4 for them. Can Kohler guard him? You know what I'm saying? So where does Jackson Kohler fit? The rebounding thing, you mentioned how Michigan State was not as good against Wisconsin rebounding-wise. It's because Kohler didn't play a whole lot. That took a lot out of them. Carson Cooper can play defense on a number of these guys, but even as versatile and quick as Carson Cooper is, he's not really had to go out on the perimeter a whole lot against teams. So if things start to get a little haywire, Michigan State might go small to match them, and then you're kind of chasing your tail. And I thought Michigan State was chasing their tail a little bit against Wisconsin when they went really small that one time with Fiddler and Carr as their two front court players with 3 guards. It didn't work out very well.
It hurts the rebounding as a result. It
didn't work out very well. And that exemplifies the point, or accentuates the point, amplifies the point that Xavier Booker's not coming around. Because when Kohler got in foul trouble, it was a natural situation. Okay, Booker, go in there, you're playing 16 minutes a day, but he couldn't handle it. So that's one area where they have not gotten development in that backup power forward position. Theoretically, Booker would be a guy that you could put in a game like this. And I think he might get a chance if Bryant plays zone like they did against Grand Canyon and St. John's. Does Booker get a shift early in this game? They've worked with Booker in that zone offense. I wouldn't doubt it that if he gets a chance, and it might not turn out well.
Yeah, but he's not Malik Hall. I'm saying, if Malik Hall was on this roster, every time someone went in zone, they absolutely destroy it. But you see Booker playing zone, and he wants to dribble when he gets the ball at the elbow.
I think Fiddler's your guy for that role. If you're going small and he's your guy.
You got to commit to that. You got to be like, Fiddler, you're our guy for the zone. You can't be like, hey, we're going to try to give Xavier Booker more developmental minutes. I'm sorry, I don't want to be negative towards Booker, but he's the weak link on this team. He has been from start of the year till the finish. He's had 2 good games where the light bulb almost went on, or it looked like it went on for 5 to 10 minutes. But this is a time of year where you can't afford to go against a team like that, get out offensive rebound, have guys drive on you, and have a deal where you're minus 12 in 4 minutes, and all of a sudden you're underwater at halftime. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen a lot of games in the NCAA tournament, even today, where a team is kind of right there in striking distance. It's a 23-21 game, and then the team goes on an 8 to 10 point run right before half, and then all of a sudden you're facing a serious deficit, and that's the last thing you want to do against this team and give them hope. And Xavier Booker's the kind of guy that they can attack, and they will attack immediately when he's in the game.
Yeah, the Booker project has regressed in the last couple of weeks, and for whatever happens the rest of the season, they want to keep his chin up and keep his confidence up. What role he might have in this game remains to be seen. If they play zone, you might see Fiddler flashing that foul line, becoming the 4. But if Carr and Fiddler both have to play a lot of minutes at the 4, again, matchups can become a little bit tricky for Michigan State. So Michigan State wants to shoot a high percentage and get in rebound and run, and not have it become a half-court matchup problematic situation. They want to just go ahead and throttle the situation from top to bottom. But it's Michigan State's got. Hey, they're giving Bryant a lot of respect. Were you getting that idea in the locker room also?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not anybody that said anything disrespectful. You know, like when I asked them,
Could you tell they were really focused in though?
Yeah, I could tell they were really focused in, and you can tell when someone's giving a team lip service. And you know, like over the years, there's a lot. You know, like when Michigan State was playing Middle Tennessee State, I felt like they were it was more lip service.
I felt the same way about Weber State way back in '95.
Right, but this was not a deal where it's lip service. They know, you know, like, and a lot of those guys have said, you know, that when I talk to them, I say we played mid-major teams and we're close at halftime or we're down at halftime, or you know, this year we understand that some of these smaller sized teams and some of the matchups that are created. You know, can create issues for you and put us in situations we haven't been in. So these guys are talking about, you know, they're not talking about, you know, possibly playing New Mexico or Marquette in the next round or anything like that. They're focused on.
And it's good that there's no like natural game in the second round for Michigan State.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
There's no Duke. There's no North Carolina. There's no
like when
Vanderbilt.
when you talk. There's no game like where when it comes to winning the weekend, that's who you're focused on. Like a Syracuse back in the day, you know, like where hey, it would really behoove us to get a lot of work in on this specific thing because we're playing a funky curveball type opponent. You know, like Michigan State, they're always going to do the win the weekend thing, and they're going to work on some elements of things that'll help them, but. Yeah, there's not an oddball like kind of opponent or one that you really have to get good at something specific that they do to win the weekend. I do think
there's no albatross like a Kentucky or a UConn there.
Yeah,
you know,
or a Kansas.
Yeah,
you know, like
exactly.
You think like when Michigan State played Miami and Miles Bridges freshman year, that was the best game they played, that Miami game, and then they went right to a Kansas, and it was like.
They were focused against Miami, though. I
Yeah.
mean, Izzo he's lost in the first round a couple of times, but last year when they played Mississippi State in the first round,
that was good, man.
And that was the best game Michigan State played all year.
Yeah, and I felt
and 2 years ago when they beat Marquette in the second round, that was the best game Michigan State played all year. So the last 2 years, Michigan State has been able to get their crap together and play their best basketball right here in March. It was only for one game, or in that case for 2 games.
And I
went to the Sweet 16.
I thought that sequence of playing USC in that first round of that tournament, and then Marquette, because I thought USC had some tricky dudes. They had, they had the 4-man that was like, quick leaper, rebounder, and really skilled, and then they had a really good point guard. That put up a lot of, like Boogie Ellis, I think it was, that put up a lot of points and was kind of a volume type guy, quick trigger dude. Yeah, I thought Michigan State did a good job going from them, and then Marquette, whom I thought that's the best team. That was the best team that I felt like was playing the hottest going into the NCAA tournament. I thought between their guards, and then they had that not just Joplin, but they had the defensive 5-man that was really skilled, that was tricky, who ended up getting drafted, I think, pretty late first round, maybe early second that year, but they had a really good team. I felt like Marquette, that was like one of the best wins I've seen had Michigan State have. And they
had to be close to perfect that day.
And
Marquette had won the Big East tournament, and they were very good. And if Michigan State hadn't beaten them, Marquette was going to beat Kansas State and beat Florida Atlantic and go to the Final Four.
Exactly. And we've talked about this over the years, like so many times. Like there's been a lot of good teams that were championship worthy. Some of those Virginia teams that Michigan State has played, and so.
Iowa State, we talked about that in the drive down here.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a
in
lot
2000.
That
team would have won the national title if State didn't beat them.
Rick Majerus is beside himself after Michigan State beat St. Louis because he felt like that was a team that had a chance to make a Final Four run. Now,
it was. He was tearful.
And Rick Majerus is a dude that you and I both respect the heck out of him, the late Rick Majerus. Like, I mean, if he had 2 players, he could get him to the Final Four.
Yeah.
He was like, if I've got 2 quality players, he's going to find a way to get them to the Final Four. He felt like they had more than that, and that team was tough as nails. That St. Louis team.
They had to play Michigan State at the Palace and lost by 6 or 7 or 8.
Right.
St. Louis was tough that year.
So there's been a lot of games like that, but I really do. I do feel like Michigan State is respecting these guys to the level that needs to be respected. And the thing that I would compare them to is, like, remember when they played Robert Morris? I think that was prior to beating USC to get to the Sweet 16 that year. They made their run to the Final Four. There's a lot of people that would overlook Robert Morris, but that was a very, very good team from the Patriot League that was really well put together. And I felt like Michigan State didn't give them the lip service that year. They gave them full attention. I feel the same way about them preparing for Bryant. If Bryant wins, it's not going to be for Michigan State overlooking them. in my opinion.
Okay. And Robert Morris was interesting because that year, first-round opponent for Michigan State, that Robert Morris was very similar to Michigan State too, but they didn't do the rebound and run. They were like box sets, 1-4 sets, slow it down. They were like the slower version of the Izzo stuff. So they did a lot of Michigan State. They literally ran more Michigan State plays than almost any team I've seen Michigan State play in the last 1,000 games.
That was a tough game.
They ran a lot of Michigan State plays. Problem is, Michigan State runs them better, knows those plays. So Michigan State was facing a JV version of themselves, took care of Robert Morris. This team is different, more athletic, more skillful. The things that they do that are Michigan State like are crashing the offensive boards, and they want to rebound and run. They want to blitz counter break after makes and misses. So you're both spectrums of what Michigan State does. Will it be a JV version? Maybe not as pronounced as the Robert Morris one was, but if it gets amplified, Michigan State can be dangerous if they mix those things together. If they're ready to play their best basketball of the year right now, and if it ends up being a JV version of Michigan State goes ahead and gets explosive.
Yeah, you don't know because this could be like a New Mexico, like when Draymond Green was, like,
New Mexico State.
Yeah, New Mexico State, where they had some kind of like a cobbled together team with some really good athletes.
Maggers were really mad at me that week because I said they were pretty good.
Yeah,
and they beat them by 4. Michigan State beat New Mexico State by 4.
And they wouldn't have beat them if it was
3. New Mexico State was shooting at the end to force overtime.
If it wasn't for a lane violation, I believe it was close. And so don't get mad because there's a lot of good players on a lot of teams.
Why do they call it March Madness, Paul?
Right, exactly. And I don't know. There's probably some Clemson fans, today that I thought Clemson was a really good team. But this tournament is weird because, Izzo was saying earlier this week about that 1 minute stretch that kills teams. But you just can't have those my bads. And sometimes guys get hot. Like Middle Tennessee State did. I feel like Indiana State team last year, if they had gotten in the tournament, they would have had a chance to make some noise. There are teams in this tournament that are dangerous.
Yeah, and I'd love to see more of those second place teams in those
in
conferences.
The Valley, man. It seems like
that team should have been in. We don't need 14 teams for one conference in a tournament. Give me second place team from the Missouri Valley.
Yeah, and I don't want to hear I don't know what happened with some of the SEC teams today, but I get really tired of hear people saying, well, this is the best the SEC has ever been, or this is the best conference that has ever, the best talent that one conference has ever had. That's bullcrap.
Well, there's 18 teams. Anybody remember the Big Ten in 1979? My guy Nils has been barking up that tree this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's
everybody was good.
And I think there's some good Big East.
Big East has had some really good years.
Saying back in John Thompson days or whatever. I mean, it's kind of the whole idea that the SEC is this and that, and it's.
We'll see. They had a lot of top 10 teams this year. They were good. We'll see how they turn out.
Yeah, and I don't know what Georgia got punked today.
Were they down 30-5 at one point?
Yeah, and I'm not saying listen, the Big Ten could lose a whole bunch of games.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. Michigan State could lose tomorrow, but I think. I
was impressed that Purdue and Wisconsin won. I was a little shaky about both of their situations
I'm impressed
today.
With Greg Gard as a coach because they went right inside. He was smart about how they subbed players. They didn't overshoot threes. They actually got out in transition, but they were calculated about it, and that was a good team. I thought Wisconsin did a good job playing team defense. Didn't get beat by penetration too much, even though Tanjay was having a hard time hitting shots, which he should be. He should have a hard time hitting shots after getting that much work last weekend. But Greg Gard, Wisconsin, to their credit, I thought Purdue looked like they were out of gas. Fletcher Lloyd couldn't buy a elbow jumper prior to this weekend. So kudos to those teams because those were not easy matchups, and hopefully Michigan State can keep that Big Ten thing rolling.
It was difficult circumstances for Wisconsin. I think they're a very good team, and I was concerned for their sake that they wouldn't be able to demonstrate that, but they did, so good for them.
Yeah, and I would say Wisconsin's the second deepest team in the Big Ten Conference, and like Michigan State, they're committed to playing a lot of different players, and they did a good job with that. We'll see what happens if they advance to the Sweet 16. That to me would be really impressive, but it'll be interesting this weekend because I think I think Bryant's good. I think both of the teams at Michigan State might play if they advance. We're fortunate enough to advance are good and dangerous.
Bryant is a team that a lot of people have not heard of. Frankly, I didn't know they were situated in Rhode Island. I'm impressed with Phil Martelli Jr., and as he continues to win there, I think he becomes a commodity. I wouldn't be surprised to see him coaching at Providence someday or somewhere like that out east, and I think he's got a good future.
Here's what I don't know because there's Michigan State doesn't really play. It's hard to play defense against ISO teams.
Right.
Against guys with quick trigger ISO teams. And I'm because guys like Jaden Akins.
That's what Nevada did back in 2004 against Michigan State.
Guys like Jaden Akins, guys like Trey Holloman, they've got a conscience when it comes to shooting. Guys like Jace Richardson, like Jeremy Fears, they don't shoot bad shots. But when you're playing an ISO team, and there's not a whole lot of assists, like a lot of Michigan State's defense is taking away, like where, like with Purdue, you're trying to take away the inverted pick and roll. Like with a lot of the teams that they play, you're trying to take away actions. You take away
who's cutting, when they're cutting, where the screen's coming from.
In games like this, these teams sometimes have a puncher's chance, and I would say like the equivalent to me would be like some of the weird Rutgers teams that played good defense, but really didn't have a structure offensively except do him. That kind of thing. And I'm not saying that, and I respect the hell out of Steve Peichel. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country, best defensive coaches in the country, but you don't know what they're going to run coming out of a timeout. I got a good feeling for what Purdue's going to run, or what a lot of different teams are going to run, or like what Michigan's going to run, or what like just basic stuff. But when you get an ISO team and you have guys that take bad shots and are used to making them, a good defense can look like junky defense really quick if those shots are falling. So that's that's the one caveat, and the one thing that I would say, like there's Buster Douglas chance in Tokyo.
I'm wondering if they scale that back. Kansas State last year, or 2 years ago, I was critical of them when they were in the top 10. I was like, they've got the worst shot selection of any top 10 team I've ever seen in my life.
But they got a point guard that can deliver it and get the ball to guys like, that's the thing.
I was like, that is not basketball. You cannot win that way. But then when they played Michigan State, they didn't. The shot selection was not as crazy.
No,
they had a couple that way, especially including 1 or 2 in overtime. But they really scaled back the ridiculousness.
No, and
that point guard was good.
And I mean, he got the ball to guys in scoring positions, and he got it there quickly, and he got it there in a manner that Michigan State really hadn't played a point guard like that.
And if you let people shoot like that, it was good for that one team that one time. How's Kansas State since then?
Yeah, and they've got one of the highest paid rosters in the country.
So impressed, before we wrap up, Phil Martelli Jr. told a story today about, he said at some point, Izzo was out on the recruiting trail with Phil Martelli Sr. when Sr. was at Michigan, and they were talking and stuff, and they just kind of mentioned that Phil Martelli III had suffered a broken arm at Bryant's youth basketball camp. Phil Martelli III was a 6th grader at the time. He was here today, a 9th grader. He was sitting with the press, and Martelli said that his dad just kind of mentioned that to Izzo off the cuff one day, and then showing up with the box at their house a few days later from Michigan State, a care package that Izzo had put together for Phil Martelli III. This is 3 years ago. And Phil Martelli Jr. is like, well, how long ago was that? 3 years ago? And his son's like, yeah, 3 years ago. And Phil Martelli Jr. is like, so I'm not really sure. He might still have one of those Michigan State shirts on underneath his Bryant shirt right now. But he's just telling a story about what Izzo had done for him years before when he was just an assistant coach at Bryant. So now in Phil Martelli Jr.'s NCAA tournament debut as head coach, he's going against Tom Izzo, and Izzo and Martelli Sr. have become close lately, so it's a fun situation all the way around there. But that really drives home the point about Izzo and the way he's respected in the coaching community for things like that we never would have even known about. That's big time.
And Martelli, I remember going all the way back to the to the Peach Jam when he was at St. Joe's. There's some guys at Michigan State was in on, but we're not quite serious about. And Izzo was like letting Martelli. I mean, he was sitting next to Martelli at a lot of events, like when Martelli was the St. Joe's coach, and like giving him recruiting intel, like, hey, these are guys we're recruiting, but we're not. Really recruiting these guys that hard. Maybe you can get them. And he was also giving them intel on some of our local guys from our state that might be recruitable. So that's a relationship that's gone on for a long time. It was cool to see, I went in and did locker room interviews, but before we went in the locker room, Phil Martelli was in the hallway with Sadie Washington. And those guys are close too because of the time they spent together on the Michigan staff. But I got to tell you, if I'm Phil Martelli, that's, as a dad, you and I are both dads, and I can't imagine what he's going through emotionally because you've got a friend that's coaching against your kid. You want your kid to do well, but you're like, I'm not going to say trepidation, and he's not, he's a competitor, but there's got to be a lot of anxiety there. Like what it's like when you're at a kid's hockey game or a baseball game and they're at bat or whatever. Multiply that by 1,000,000, and I think it's going to be cool in retrospect, but Phil Martelli is going to have, he's going to have some stomach knots tomorrow.
Phil Martelli's coached against Michigan State the last 5 years. What do you think he's telling them? This transition game is for real. Don't go as hard to the offensive glass. I wonder, and
I don't-
to be a fly on the wall to hear what like the 3 takeaways are
I don't-
after 5 years of Martelli scouting Michigan
I
State.
don't think you can change who you are. I firmly believe that, but I think you have to be a better version of yourself, if that makes sense. Because I don't think you can go. I don't think you could be like some of the stuff that you see like Bryant do, that they can, that works at their level won't work against Michigan State. And but I think you have to be smart too, because you can't be like, hey, we're just going to run with them because Michigan State's deeper, and they're fresh, and they've got guards that get into you and all that type of thing. But I don't know. You can't change the way you can't change what you do. But I do think you have to be smart about it. And I do think there's been times like if I go back to Michigan State, Thomas always wants to run, but there's times where you have to be selective about it. You can't do it nonstop, otherwise you're going to wear yourself out. And we saw that the last few years when Michigan State's depth wasn't quite as good. There were times where they couldn't run. And so I think that would probably be the advice that Phil Martelli would probably give them is like, do what you do, but you got to be smart about it.
Izzo's advice to Martelli Jr. would probably be do what you do, because back in 1998, the first year that Izzo made the NCAA tournament, they won the Big Ten title, and they had done it with 4 to the boards. And even more so in 99 and in 2000. But in 98, they beat Eastern Michigan in an 8-9. I think it was an 8-9 game. Maybe it was a 5-12 when Earl Boykins and those guys. Second round, it was Sweet 16 after they beat Princeton. In the Sweet 16, they played North Carolina.
Yeah.
And Izzo scaled it back. And he said he learned something.
Those guys were.
Yeah, they didn't go 4 to the boards. And he said, I learned something about you got to be who you are. That might not be the case all the time, but if Bryant had drawn St. John's, or who's the other 2 seeds, Alabama, and who else? If they'd have drawn St. John's or something like that, and if Izzo had one of his conversations with Phil Martelli Jr. this week, like he had twice in the previous 5 days, he might say something like that, be who you are. That would have been the case if he played St. John's. Being who you are against Michigan State might be combustible, but that's probably what Izzo's advice to him would be.
Here's the other thing, too. Like, I think it helps Michigan State. We talked about a minute ago about like the Big Ten, how many different styles of play. But there are teams that Michigan State has played that have gone 4 to the boards. I would feel, so it's like not completely foreign to Michigan State.
No, it is. Illinois did it, and I talked to Izzo about it.
Right, but having seen that from Illinois, it prepares you, because like if they hadn't played a team like that, then it would be a problem.
Because when I asked Izzo before the Illinois game, have you ever faced a team that went 4 to the boards? He said never in 1,000 games. Illinois did it. Michigan State was up to the task, out-rebounded them, and had a really good rebounding year for Michigan State. And they're going to need it again in this game against Bryant. Bryant's going to come after them, crash the boards hard. It's going to be entertaining. Anything else, Paul?
If you go 4 to the boards and Michigan State rebounds with you,
they don't do it all the time. They just do it here and there.
But if you do it, I mean, that leads to
Illinois tried to do it all the time.
That leads to transition scoring
Yes,
opportunities.
it does.
And
that's why Michigan State doesn't do it anymore.
So that's the thing. Like you can say, like, hey, Bryant looks sloppy in transition defense. Well, part of the reason they look sloppy in transition defense is because they've got your guards crashing down, going 4 to the boards, and those guys can't get back. It's just part of what it is. I mean, it works for them, but there is a downside to everything you do, right? So that's one of them. And against the Michigan State team that wants to get out and run, that's a potential downside. Now Michigan State can't leak out, and they can't try to force transition, because then you play into Bryant's hands. So Michigan State's guards have to be very active, erase those guys, but you can't cheat it. If you're Michigan State, you can't try to force transition. You got to take what comes to you, and otherwise you're gonna play into Bryant's hands. But I do think that 4 to the boards thing, it's tough. I do think, having seen it against Illinois, which I think was at that time the best rebounding team in the country, I think it prepares Michigan State well, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan State run, score a lot of points in transition. But you got to finish at the rim, those type of things. You got to make open shots. I think they're going to get good looks. They got to finish them, though.
What's interesting is Bryant really emphasizes the blocked shot, and that's good in the American East. We'll see how that goes against Michigan State. If they get overzealous going for block shots on the perimeter inside, pump fake, one more dribble, playing off 2 feet, Michigan State should be ready for that.
Shot blocking stuff doesn't, like, I'm thinking of, like, we talked about earlier this week about New Mexico and Richard Pitino and stuff like that. And teams that sell out to shot block against Michigan State usually don't fare well, because Michigan State's bigs are pretty good at big-to-big passing. You're going to see pick and roll dunks then, that type of thing. overcommitting to doing one thing or another really tends not to do well against Michigan State.
All right. So anything else, Paul?
No.
For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Rocket Arena in Cleveland, Ohio, in the first round of the NCAA tournament for 2025. You've been watching the VCast at SpartanMag.com.